I'm going to. That's it like that.
Well,
So
you need to start out with the fact that if you're going to do both of us, that we've been married for 52 years or 54 years or whatever.
okay.
50. It's been
It'll be
54 going
54
on 55.
in December, see.
We're going December be 55.
Yeah.
So now you lived in Palatka at that time, right?
No, Willaca.
Willaca. Okay.
A town of about 250 people. And the reason we lived there, the reason we had to move with my grandparents is because of the Depression. Everybody, my father lost his job. Everybody lost jobs in those days. And he became a traveling salesman for office supplies.
So would he travel like to Jacksonville? Was that his main?
He traveled all around the north part of Florida. Yeah.
How often would you see him at that time?
Well,
Right about.
He was never gone more than one night
Okay.
because it wasn't that far that he couldn't come back home.
So you were
I was
you were
born.
in elementary school at the time?
No. I was born there
Okay.
and lived there until we moved to West Palm Beach. I was 3 years old, I think,
You were 3 years old when you moved to West Palm? Okay.
because my father was able to get a job in West Palm Beach with a office supply company that he used to represent. But it was hard times for everybody. We were fortunate because we lived on a farm. We had plenty of vegetables, we had plenty of fruit, because we lived in the middle of an orange grove. And my grandfather grew peanuts and watermelons and all kind of vegetables. Plus we had plenty of fish living on the St. Johns River.
And now, did your older
Sisters.
siblings have to do the work around the farm and stuff? Could they not go to school at that time?
Oh no, they went to school.
Okay.
They went to school.
But they would.
And then we had certain chores we had to do, sure.
Did you guys ever sell your food to like people around the town?
No, my grandfather gave it away
Okay.
to help people out. Everybody shared. And of course we had plenty of venison. They practically walked through the town back in those days. and Grandmama had lots of chickens that she raised, and we had rabbits. So we were not hurting for food. Like a lot of people were in the cities. They were terrible. There were long lines, food lines. People were starving in the first part of the Depression. And of course, Granddad, you can tell him how tough it was for you all having to raise chickens in your yard.
Yeah, we lost our house, first house, and we had to move, and so we rented a house for 3 years, and my dad was a general agent in the life insurance business, and being a Christian person, he felt like, because back in those days, agents collected the premium and banked it and then sent it to the home office. And so when the bank crashed, he lost the premium money, and he felt obligated to it. So he was working, trying to get enough together to pay back what was lost. And then when I was 7 years of age, my mother's mother bought a house on Hannah Avenue for taxes, and it was the first house built on Seminole Heights, and the street was named after the person that built the home. And we had a house, we had running water, but we had and we had electricity, but we had no heat. We had no air conditioning. We had, of course, back then they didn't have it. And we had no hot water. We'd have to boil it in pots and then pour it in the tub, because all we had was bathtub, no showers. My dad bought chickens. We raised chickens. We sold the eggs. In order to have income, we sold the chickens. We had fruit trees. We sold the fruit trees. We had what's called guava trees. And Mother would make guava jelly, and we would sell the guava jelly. We didn't recognize it as kids that we had a big problem, like my father and mother did. And so we went with the flow. It was easy for us because we didn't know any different. Fortunately, we were right near, as kids, we were right near a playground behind an elementary school, Seminole Elementary School. And so we spent our time, if we weren't working, with our chores of taking care of chickens, and we would go down to the playground and play ball. And, we did have one car, and my mother got a job at Pittsburgh Plate Glass Company, and so my dad would take her down to work and then pick her up in the afternoon. We were fortunate enough to have a bicycle. I think it was given to us by somebody. When I got out of elementary school, I had to go to Memorial High School and then to Hillsborough High School, and that was 1.5 miles away from our home, and we would walk. Or if we were fortunate enough to have a nickel, we got the streetcar. But normally when we had a nickel, we'd buy a Baby Ruth candy bar. But we didn't think we were lacking things because we enjoyed our lives back then and what we did.
What about like in the school? Were there like enough books for everybody?
Oh yeah, we never had to worry about the books, paper, pencils.
It was all provided.
They were all provided. And even we would have occasionally
Coach B.
Hit that middle button. And it'll quit vibrating.
we would occasionally have hand-me-downs from our cousins as far as clothes was concerned. But it was a good life for us. We didn't have TV, thank goodness. Nobody had TV. We would, my dad being a religious man, he taught Sunday school. We would go to Sunday school in the Sunday morning, and then church after Sunday school, and then go to, it's called MYF now, but it was Epworth League.
What was it, Epworth League?
Epworth League. EPWRTH. And then after Epworth League met in the early Sunday evening, and we would go to church that night. And then come Wednesday, we would go to the Wednesday prayer meeting. And of course, my brother and I were involved in athletics through our lives, so that was our entertainment. So the hard times as far as the depression was concerned had to do with the parents, not the children so much. Of course, being raised in a Christian family was a big help.
Let me ask you this: Did you guys have a radio?
Yeah, we had a radio. Yep.
Do you remember like the time when FDR was elected and he had his fireside chats and all
Yep.
that?
I don't remember a lot of the conversation.
But do you remember sitting and listening to that?
Occasionally, yeah. Occasionally.
Do you remember? Did you feel like hopeful, or do you remember your parents feeling hopeful after he was elected that times were going to get better, or do you remember anything like that? Did they feel any animosity towards the government, or
No.
I guess is what I'm trying to say.
No.
Or
No, there was no animosity. Of course, my dad was a Christian man. He didn't have animosity. I guess there was a lot of people that might have, but there was no animosity in our family. We struggled.
it was just something you had to get through,
Yeah.
basically.
Did you ever hear him talking politics?
Nope.
Not really.
Although after the Depression, and when things were in 1940, my dad came down with spinal meningitis, and he ended up in the Veterans Hospital. And we, you know, we didn't have any problem, although it meant that my brother and I and my sister had a lot more chores to do at the house to make ends meet. My mother worked, and we always had something to eat. I can remember one summer
I got something, yeah. Over there. Thank you.
my family had we had 400 pounds of chicken we ate one summer. We'd eat chicken in the morning and chicken in the noon and chicken at night. And then after 1940, my dad wasn't supposed to live, but he was determined to live, and he got involved in the health food, vitamins, and so forth. But anyway, in 1943, Curtis Hickson was the county commissioner, and he ran for mayor of Tampa, and he won. So the governor appointed my dad to fill out his term as county commissioner for 1 year. And my dad, two of his best friends decided they would run for county commissioner, so my dad ran for railroad commissioner, which is a public service commissioner for the state of Florida. And because he was a Christian man, he didn't take any money that had any obligation to it. Well, he lost to the guy that took money from every aspect of the country, good or bad, and he became the railroad commissioner, which I guess worked out best for us because that meant we still lived in Tampa instead of having to move to Tallahassee.
Now, what year did you say that was? That he ran for county or railroad commissioner?
That was in 1944.
Was Granddad in World War I?
Yep. For a short time. And then he had a ear infection, which caused him to be discharged.
Was he overseas? Did he see battle?
No, he never got into battle. But he served it 8 months, I think it was.
Do you remember, like, the events that led up to World War II? Do you remember hearing about those, or?
Yeah, listening to, about Hitler.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, we heard that. Everybody did.
Did you guys even think to question it, or do you remember?
You mean of our involvement in it?
Well,
in
just-
Europe?
Just saying to yourself, what's going
Yeah.
on over there, that doesn't sound right, or?
Oh yeah, there was always discussions about that. The fact that we hated to see the soldiers go over there, but we knew that it's better to fight the war over there than it was over here.
Mm-hmm. What about, like, Pearl Harbor? Do you remember that?
Remember
Were
very
you in-
well.
Were you in church, or did they stop church, or do you remember what happened when you first heard?
No. And it's December the 7th, what was it? 42?
I thought it was 41,
Right.
because D-Day was 44.
Yeah, but it didn't take us long to, well, it could have been 41.
Maybe it was 43.
41.
I'll figure it out before I type the paper.
Thank goodness. But anyway, we, being as young as I didn't think about or worry about going into service or anything. Although when I was a senior, no, I was a freshman at the University of Florida in 1945, the war was still on. And I think it was that summer. Of course, when I was a freshman, I went to the University of Florida in June. As soon as I graduated high school, I was up at the University of Florida. And my folks let me off there, and my mother cried and went home. The next weekend I was home, because back then you could hitchhike on the road and people picked you up. You went, and then when I had to go back to school on Sunday, I come home Friday night, go back Sunday night, they would take me out to the end of the county there and let me off, and I'd hitchhike back. Never had any problem getting a ride. And then I was
What road was it? Did you go on 41?
41.
41?
Would you cut over on like what is now Archer, or?
Yeah. At any rate, I was about to be drafted, I guess it was, and Congressman Hardin Peterson from Lakeland was a good friend of my dad's, and so he got me an appointment to West Point, and I had to go to Fort McPherson to take tests. And when I was up there at Fort McPherson, all the other guys taking the test, it seemed like all of them were football players from the Southeastern Conference. Because that's when West Point had some great football. And if you went to West Point, you go there 4 years, and that wasn't considered 4 years of college. But anyway, I ended up in 46 going in the service to do occupation duty in Japan.
How long did you serve?
I served 18 months. That's what I joined for, 18 months.
And you were stationed in Japan?
Yeah, I ended up spending 13 months in Japan.
Tell them what you did, though.
Well, when I got over to Japan, I only had 4 weeks of basic training before they shipped me over, and then they asked those that had played college basketball, because I had played my freshman year at Florida college basketball also. So they asked us to sign up, and I figured I'd sign up and play basketball. I ended up in the MPs. They really thought they were going to get a 6-foot plus person, but they ended up getting a 5-foot 8-inch. No, 5. Yeah.
You're only 5'8"?
No, 5 foot. I guess I'd grown then. I'd gone up. But anyway, I came back. I went in about 5'8" or 5'9" and came back 5'10". I grew another inch in the service. But I spend most of my time playing baseball and football in Japan, so.
And then when you came back, were you, had anything changed as far as the city or the state as far as?
Oh, yes. Yes. Things were beginning to change all around. When I first went to Florida, it was a boys' school. When I came back, it was co-ed.
Was it hard when you came back you just went right back to school? You didn't have to sign, did you have to sign something or? They
No.
just took y'all back in?
Yep.
You just let them know I'm back?
Yep. The athletic department took care of everything. And I got $75 a month from the government for educational purposes, and I had $15 a month at that time was called laundry money for athletes. So I had $90 a month. I was rich. I didn't have a car. Never got a car until I graduated. And you know, the athletic department fed you, and of course, if I had, as far as clothes, when I got out of service, the first thing I did when I got home was I bought a zoot suit. They had zoot suits back then, with peg pants, double-breasted, one-button roll, and it was pinstripe.
Jared, you know what he's talking about, what it looks like?
Mm-mm.
You have to look in online and see.
And when I got married, the first thing
Z-O-O-T.
that happened when I got married is Judy threw out my zoot suit.
It's sort of like the ugly leisure suits they had in the 70s.
It was worse.
Dad said you threw out his zoot suit. Your Dad said you threw out his zoot suit when you got married.
Tried to mock me, I didn't.
It was something else. That's the first suit I ever owned.
So then this was now the late 40s? You were working at plant?
No, it's the early 50s.
Okay.
Well, I graduated in 51 from Florida, and then I had a job with Wilson Sporting Goods, the manufacturer, and they had a branch office in Miami. So I ended up in Miami. And then Judy and I got married in December of 51.
How was life in Miami different than life in like Gainesville? Because that's where you had obviously lived.
Well, Gainesville was a very slow kind of country town, except for the university. It would have been nothing. We walked wherever we went, unless somebody had a car, and very few athletes had cars. But we didn't need them because we could walk wherever we wanted to go. I don't think they walk anymore nowadays at the university. I think most people ride. We have a parking problem. You knew a lot of people because we were talking about at the most 3,000 students in 45, and then when I came back in 48, they maybe had 10,000. And I think today they got almost 50,000. We had a lot more campus as far as space, open space. now there's very little open space on the campus. Gosh, there were some things that I can't talk about, but that we had some good times. And as far as Miami is concerned, I had one of Judy's cousins, one of our cousins, was in the real estate business, Mary Reed, and she talked to me about buying some property out in South Miami. For $100 an acre, but it looked like coral, or it was all coral rock, and wasn't much to it. Except today, that's where the international airport is. Of course, I didn't have the $100 to buy 1 acre, but anyway, that would have been a tremendous deal.
Was at that time, was the railroad, well, was tourism big at that time in Miami?
Yeah,
What kind of,
tourism was always big, but the railroad was big back then. I remember when we went on football trips, we didn't fly, we took the train. I remember playing my freshman year, going to New Orleans on the train to play Tulane. And back in '48, we took the train to go to Greenville, South Carolina to play Furman. I remember that trip vividly because that's when I hurt my knee, and so I was in a wheelchair at the train station, and the guys rolled me in the women's restroom and left me.
Counting tails.
There wasn't many cars, and television didn't get in until about 1950.
Well, it was before then, but it was,
Not at Gainesville.
people started getting
Yeah.
televisions in the 50s. But I had one.
Yeah, I bought it for you.
Yeah.
And we used to have the Wednesday night fights, Pabst Blue Ribbon, Wednesday night fights, and everybody would, all the guys would get together and get over to Judy's house for to watch the fights, and that was a big deal. Bring you the beer and pop the popcorn and sit down there and drink beer and watch the Wednesday night fights. It wasn't good television, but you could see it, black and white. And then when I flipped my car I guess it was February or something around there, 52, out of Jasper. I was going to sell some equipment to FSU, and I didn't get hurt, but it messed up the car, and I finally had to get a rental. And I decided I'd get off the road. And when Frank Lorenzo became head coach at Plant, I played high school and college football with him, and so I sent him a wire and asked him if he needed a backfield coach, and he says, "You're hired, come on down." So that's how I ended up coaching at Plant. Judy got a job in the athletic department at the University of Tampa teaching. And stayed in Dad's house, and that's when, matter of fact, we were in there when your mama was born, and I can remember your Aunt Kathy who was there, and I'd take Mama to the hospital, and I'd go home and go to bed, and the hospital called and says, you got a little girl, and so I remember telling Kathy when I got her, well, she says, good, let's go tell Mommy. But that's off the record. But anyway, and then in 54, Cello became head coach at, that was in 53, but in 54 he and the backfield coach didn't get along too well. And so I talked to him about coaching Tampa U, and I got more money by going to Tampa U. And I was on the staff, and Judy was faculty, so that's how we could stay at the same place.
So you,
And
sorry, go ahead.
I coached there 4 years, and it wasn't integrated at all, not any of that time. It wasn't until the 60s when it became integrated. And then after having 4 daughters, I decided I had to go to work for a living. So I got out of coaching and went into insurance business. Can I take a pee break?
Yeah. That's right there. So what year was it when you got a job with insurance?
It was in February of 1958.
Okay.
I went to work for an insurance company called Pan American Life Insurance. They were out of New Orleans, and they just opened up a branch office here. And my dad had affiliations with Pan American when he was doing a lot of selling, so that's the reason I went with Pan American. And I was the top producer in the agency my first year, but I found out that the agency manager, I didn't have much training. He gave me learned how to read the rate book, taught me how to read the rate book, and that's it. No sales spiel or anything else. And I sold a lot of insurance because of people knowing me, knowing my dad. And then I made a mistake. Instead of concentrating on the life insurance business only, I had a friend of mine that was from Plant City that was running for state legislature. And I helped him in his campaign. And that interfered with the insurance business. And then I told Huerta that when I left him that I would help him scout some teams. So I took I scouted Chattanooga, I scouted FSU, I scouted VMI, I scouted, those were the 3 schools. And that took time, scouting them, and then preparing the scout report. So it interfered with the insurance business, and so I really learned a lesson there. And then Bill Steen came along, and well, he was a tremendous salesperson, and he showed me a sales program, and so I left Pan American and went with Banker's Life of Des Moines, Iowa. The Banker's Life, Des Moines, Iowa. And I went in as a unit supervisor, which gave me a salary, and then what I made on commissions. And it was a struggle, but I learned a lot about the insurance business from him. And then in 1966, he died, and they appointed me agency manager.
Now, back then, was there very much knowledge in the public as far as insurance goes, or was it still a relatively
No,
new idea?
for instance, I was agency manager in 1973, and we were the first agency in the history of the company to do 50 million plus of insurance. A $10,000 policy was a good-sized policy back then. Wasn't an awful lot of term insurance, so most of it was what they call whole life, ordinary life.
So it was very basic.
Very
There wasn't
basic.
all this fire insurance and car insurance.
Well,
It was just,
that's a different style of it.
yeah,
I was in life and health,
okay.
and
So it's basically a bit balloon. Everything was covered in this, or was it more?
no, it's just sold a life policy, or sold a health insurance policy,
Okay.
or we sold group life and health. I wasn't involved in the property casualty end of it at all. I mean, that's what you're talking about.
Okay. I gotcha.
On that umbrella type thing.
Now back in those days, or back then, did you see Tampa kind of growing a little bit, or did you see
Saw
it?
it growing a lot.
Yeah. What was that like? And where was it growing? And
Well,
what were
the more and more people were coming to Florida, and they it used to be that you'd have to travel a pretty good ways when you travel from Tampa to St. Petersburg before you see any activity much, or to Clearwater, or to go to the beaches between St. Petersburg and Clearwater and go out further west to the beaches. You had to travel there when there wasn't anything around. And so you can see the change in that. And shoot, the country if you went to, for instance, you went to Plant City, that was like leaving Tampa and then traveling before you got to any population to get to Plant City. You're going south down to Ruskin, and that was, and all that was farmlands around there. And there wasn't anything. I mean, it was like being in about Gung Highway, you were in the country on Gung Highway. It used to be a long trip just to get to Tarpon Springs. So with the road structure and the population increasing, I mean, it's just unbelievable, the population increase. And of course that helped the insurance industry. The more people that came down, the more chances you had of having clients. The other thing that helped was the building of the former sombrero. I mean, it used to be that you played your games at Phillips Field. Well, it's held 12,500 people. And when I was at Florida, we played Kentucky there one time, and the University of Kentucky, when Bear Bryant was there, and it seated 12,500. They had 20,000 at the game. They had people out on the field almost. They crashed the gates because they were going to hold them back, and the people wanted to see the game, so they crashed the gates, and they had a heck of a time. Where Pepin Rouge Stadium is, you know where that is in Tampa? The Tampa Bay Smokers baseball team used to play ball games there. That was the big ballpark we had. Cuscaden Park was a big recreation area back in the 40s and the 50s. They used to have tremendous softball games every night, practically. And that was not slow pitch, but fast pitch softball. I remember before they had Davis Causeway Bridge, you had to travel a long way to get over to Clearwater. You had to go almost to Pasco County to get there. Now the population of Florida has just grown, and it's actually one of the fastest growing states in the Union. But I can remember when they replaced the streetcars. They took them out. But the streetcars was one of the best methods of transportation to get around the city. And then they brought in the buses. And a lot of people travel buses. Of course, it was pretty cheap back then. I remember our maid used to have to take 2 buses to get from East Tampa, outside Ybor City. She was traveling from 34th Avenue to downtown and then catch another bus out to Sunset Park in order to come to work. But a lot of them did that. Gosh, so many things have happened in Tampa here all your life, you just see those things, and they don't mean an awful lot to you, but I guess for somebody else that it's quite a story of how Tampa's changed. I grew up in North Tampa, Seminole Heights, and we used to think that all the people who lived in South Tampa, Palmacia area were rich people. Until I moved here and I found out that they weren't all rich. Of course, they had a lot of them on Bayshore Boulevard, those beautiful homes on Bayshore Boulevard. You see the changes now where you're building condos now where they had homes. I can remember back in the 40s, late 40s, or the 40s period, where Moss Brothers was the center of attention. I mean, it was the center of town.
And where was that located?
That was on Franklin and Street, and I think either Jackson or Madison Avenue. They're tearing it down and going to build a condo there, I understand, according to the paper this morning. But I can remember people congregating on the corner there to see their friends, and that would be from all parts of Tampa. I can remember haunts being drive-in, where you would drive in and get a hamburger or, you know, and eat there in the drive-in. And they used to have the Colonnade was a drive-in at one time, and that was served South Tampa. And we used to have one, I think it was called Failers. I remember Goody Goody restaurant was a place where a lot of people like to go. And of course, they just recently tore Goody Goody down. They had the special way to fix hamburgers. I also remember athletic equipment down there was furnished by the high schools instead of the kids having to buy them like they do today. I mean, they furnish shoes, helmets, jerseys, uniforms, tennis, basketball shoes if you played basketball. Warm-ups, they furnished the warm-up gear. But we either traveled by train or we traveled by bus or by car, depending on the type of travel we did. We never traveled to Miami, but we always went to Jacksonville every year to play ball. I can remember when Orlando was the most beautiful city in the United States. With its lakes, you remember that?
Oh, it was gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. You could see all the lakes, and the lakes were surrounded by oak trees, and they were beautiful.
So what would you say, like, back then when you would view, like, the rest of the state? Would you, I mean, I don't know what I'm trying to say. How did you guys view the rest of the state as far as, let's say...
Growth, you mean?
Yeah, that and tourism, and what did you guys think of tourism back then?
Well, living in Miami, we had a lot of tourists
Oh, yeah.
and a lot of New Yorkers
Especially to Miami
came
Beach.
down to the beach. And Al Capone owned one of the islands that goes across the causeway. Rather, he owned his big home on one of those little islands. And there was only one hospital at the time. That was the county hospital. Growing up there, it was a great time at that time for the city of Miami, because it was very prosperous even during the war. Things were very prosperous in Miami. And so many tourists came down no matter what. They came on the train if they couldn't come any other way or fly.
Was tourism a thing for like all the just the rich
Tourism
and
was
famous, or
was one of the big things.
Yes.
but anybody
Miami.
could come, or just the rich?
No, anybody could come,
Yeah.
but normally it's just the rich that came down.
Yeah. Well, when I was growing up, some of the famous people who came into Florida was John Jacob Astor. He was like a Rockefeller. He's the one who brought his yacht down the St. John's and named the little town where he stayed Astor Park. And it's still a very prosperous little town. And there were a lot of people that came into Jacksonville on their big yachts and came down. And this was before the inland waterway was fixed all the way, you see. So they had to go down to St. John's and then into Sanford. And that's why a lot of them went into Orlando area too. But Miami was the biggest draw at the time. Now, this was in the late 30s and early 40s. Even during the war, Miami was packed with people. And of course, Miami Beach was turned, all the hotels on Miami Beach were turned into places for the troops. And that's where a lot of them trained, especially the Navy, because of the big basin there and the jetties that went way out into the ocean, so that they had it, and the islands there. The Miami Beach during the war was strictly military. All the large hotels were turned over to the military. The Air Force and the Navy and the Marines. And even the Coast Guard trained down there because of all the water accessible in the river. And the islands. Biscayne Key had nothing on it but a shack and a lighthouse when I was growing up. And we used to take a rowboat and go out to Biscayne Key and dive down and get lobsters, Florida lobsters, in the rocks close to the island. And then we'd take them up on the beach and get seawater and cook them right there in a bucket on the beach. That's where they made the movie They Were Expendable with John Wayne on Biscayne Key. And that was about the invasion over in the Pacific. actually, West Palm Beach had dirt roads on Palm Beach when I was growing up. Very few paved roads. Only the main road was paved, A1A. All those big mansions, they had dirt roads going out to them. Because I used to go with my cousins every once in a while.
I
They
can
let
remember
me.
when I was in junior high, I used to ride my bike about 3 miles to downtown to go to Tampa because my grandmother and aunt lived near the city of Tampa.
Downtown now. It's called downtown where they lived.
And there was no problem with traffic because there wasn't many cars.
No. Very few.
Do you guys remember after the war, a lot of people coming that had maybe trained here and said, "Oh, that's a really nice place, so I want to come live there." Do you remember a lot of that going on?
Yes.
Oh, yes, especially in Miami.
And especially here in Tampa because we had
Yeah.
MacDill Air Force Base and we
Yeah.
had Drew Field.
A lot of the military came back.
Where the 3rd Air Force was at Drew Field. I remember they used to fly B-26s out of MacDill Field and
Drew Field had the big bombers.
yeah.
Now, is that where USF is now?
No,
Where's
Drew Field,
at?
it was where the big airport is.
That's where HCC is,
Yeah.
Hillsborough Community College.
Did y'all hear during those times? Did you hear a lot about Camp Blanding and that being a big military?
Oh yeah.
You know where-
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
That's where all the draftees went.
Yeah.
To Camp Blanding when they first were drafted in the service or enrolled in the service. They went to Camp Blanding.
First, for training.
That was around Stark, Florida.
Mm-hmm.
The state of Florida had a lot of different bases. I remember the
Well,
Jacksonville.
Homestead was one of the big Air Force bases for fighter pilots. And Sebring had a base.
Yeah, they had that was a bombing base.
Yeah.
Bombing.
Range.
Temporary bombing. Bombing range at Sebring, Florida, where they practiced dropping bombs. And
Probably wasn't anything out there.
nobody.
Well, Florida was so accessible because of the fact that
Peninsula.
they didn't have snow and you know, the weather was perfect for training of any kind. Tourism was the thing back in the late 40s and early 40s. And then after the war, they started tourism again. Tourists came back to Florida, all over Florida.
Do you remember, we talked a lot in our class about different ploys and ways cities would use to bring tourists in.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember that? Like
Oh, the
postcards? or-
advertisement, yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That would be like individual cities doing that?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Tampa was not a tourist town. St. Pete, Clearwater the one where the tourists would go. They wouldn't come to Tampa.
No,
Tampa was
the
an
beaches,
industrial.
the beaches were the draw. West Palm Beach and Miami were the big draw. See, the little tiny towns going up US 1 were nothing. It was the bigger cities that drew the people.
What about the Keys? Were those popular at that time too?
Yes, as soon as they built the
Railroad all the way down.
the 7-mile bridge, yeah. Of course, I lived through a lot of hurricanes.
Of course, back then you could ride out the hurricanes.
Mm,
Really?
yeah.
Would you have any notice of a hurricane coming or a big storm coming, or
No,
how would you know?
Very little.
very little.
Very little. In Miami, we did. We had notice maybe 24 hours, and that was it. But we didn't have Hurricane Hunter planes and that type of thing. All we had was the radio. But Miami and down toward the Keys was always seemed to be the ones that were hit. Between West Palm Beach and Key West, it seemed they all used to come right in through there. And Miami was quite a bit. I'd say every year in high school, I can remember getting out of school for 2 or 3 days. Every single year because of a hurricane. And when the Matacumbe Key, when the hurricane hit Matacumbe Key, that was the worst that I lived in because that killed everybody. The key was swept completely clean. No trees, nothing left.
What was
And,
the name of that again?
Matacumbe Key. I was 13 years old, and the last train out of Key West was caught on Matacumbe Key, and everybody drowned. 800 and something people. That was one of the worst. It was a 20-foot wall of water that went across the key.
There was no such thing as an evacuation route.
No.
You
Just
just couldn't
stayed.
evacuate.
No, you just had to ride it out. There was no place to go. Now during the
They didn't have the infrastructure to
I was in West Palm Beach for the
To evacuate people.
1927 hurricane, that where Lake Okeechobee overflowed, and they brought people into our church. The churches opened their doors to the people, and they brought all the refugees from Pahokee and all of those towns around Lake Okeechobee into West Palm Beach. And we didn't think anything about having no electricity for days, you know, like people do today. They have a fit if they don't have power.
Yeah.
We just made do, you know. We never thought about it. We knew we weren't going to have it, and we didn't have it. But the interesting times during the war were the blackouts in Miami, because the German submarines were sighted off of Miami and even in the Gulf. And when a big tanker was sunk off of Jupiter, from West Palm Beach north, there was tar all over the sand coming in. It just kept rolling into on shore of the beach. And the air raid sirens would go off, and we'd have to turn out everything, turn off all the lights. And they had to paint all the lights black. The street lights on the top were all painted black so that no light would go up.
So was that to,
And then
Make
they
them
had to
think
turn
no-
all the
nothing was there.
electricity off. You know,
Well, it wouldn't be
they turned
any
all the power off when the sirens went off. You had no power, no lights on the street or anything.
Of course, we didn't have air conditioning back then.
No. But you didn't worry about people breaking in your house. You didn't worry about riding the bus.
That's right.
You didn't worry about walking at night. There was no problems.
That's right. I don't recall ever having a key to the house on Hannah. Even when we were down there.
Mm-mm. It was a glorious time to grow up. It really was.
if you don't mind, I'm gonna kind of fast forward a little bit
Mm-hmm.
into like Vietnam War. What can you recall as far as what were people saying about Vietnam? Like before, did you all realize something was going on before we officially got in the war?
You know?
Do you realize something was going on
Yes,
over there?
because you could hear the news
Hey.
and see the news at that point.
Johnny,
See the news
hold
on
on.
television.
Hold
and
on a minute.
See everything that was going on all over.
Let me take it over.
I said,
Johnny
tell her I'll
May.
call her back. That I have company. Tell her I'll call her back.
Johnny, she'll have to call you back. We got company here now. All right. Okay, I know. All right. She got some damn letters.
I know.
She got a bill. She don't want her lights cut off.
She has a fit if we don't pay the bill immediately. She thinks her lights are going to be turned off. Her water's going to be turned off. All kinds of things. She's
So
getting
anyway,
very senile.
what were you talking about?
Vietnam.
Yeah.
You realized something was going on over there because of the news and everything, but nothing was said from the government.
No.
You just
Nothing
knew.
was until they started drafting the boys, and then we went through the time when a lot of them were defecting to Canada. But
Well, the only thing that bothered us here, the Vietnam War, is the way that the media and some of the people were so anti our government for getting involved.
and of course the Kent State
Yeah.
thing was a big deal at that time too.
The shooting.
Yep.
What was the viewpoint? I don't even know. Did y'all ever see any rallies or hippies forming around here, or did you
Not
ever
around
see anything
here.
like that?
No, you see all those things would be around universities.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, they were mostly around the universities. There were two factions, one for and one against the war, and it was that way all the time.
Always been that way.
Same way today.
That way World War II.
Mhm.
Except
Yeah.
we were a little more together, and the media was not as liberal as it is today.
No, the media backed the boys in the service, backed them very well, but not like today.
Let me ask you this. I should have asked you this before. The Cuban Missile Crisis, being so close,
Yeah.
what was that like?
Well,
As far as
I was teaching at Robinson at the time, and of course Robinson was a new school, and we were right close to the base, and so the people came out to the school and told us that we had to teach the kids how to get underneath the table in case of bombs. We had to give them physical exercises to make them strong, and because if something happened, they might have to help carry somebody a long distance, and they were using Brooksville as where you would go to evacuate in case of a bomb. But our principal was, I don't know what you'd call it, not only knowledgeable, but practical, and told us, says, every time we had to have the people would come out, I can't think of the name of it. What was the name of that group that formed, that took over all that stuff? I can't think of the name of it.
I can't either.
Anyhow, there was a group of people in Tampa that were supposed to be able to do the evacuation and all this other stuff. Well, Jack Marley says, if a bomb is dropped on, don't put Jack Marley in there though, if a bomb is dropped at MacDill Field, there ain't gonna be anything left of Robinson. I don't know why they're making us do this. And it's true. They were bound to hit Robinson too. So he didn't make us do all that stuff. But there were special exercises to get strength, upper strength, that type of thing. Oh, me.
was there a large emphasis put on kids? Was there a large emphasis on like communism and being against communism in schools?
It was not discussed very much in history classes. No, there really wasn't.
That was the communism thing was the Eugene McCarthy situation, and that was more in Washington and
Hollywood.
and Hollywood.
So y'all never really
We never
had to
were
deal with
affected
anything
by
like
it.
that.
No. No.
Okay.
I guess more people up north would be. We did not have the ethnic population that the big cities had at that time.
What were your thoughts on USSR and all that? I mean, with like the airlift, the Berlin airlift, and all that stuff. Did you?
Well, yeah, because we were for it, of course, because of the fact what all of our troops had been through during World War II, and we did not want to have to do the same thing again. So naturally, everybody supported it.
Well, we thought that it was a dumb thing that the president did when he had our part of Germany on the west instead of the east, and we had the airlift to get over there to the west.
It was very stupid.
Should have had Russia in the west and us in the east. That's the only thing. It just didn't make sense of why they did it that way.
How it was divided. I think Eisenhower was probably the first military man that was president after, let's see, Jackson, or no, Andrew Jackson was before before Grant, wasn't he?
Washington was the first military man.
I know, but I was talking about since Grant, and
Yeah, really, there wasn't.
there wasn't. I think Eisenhower
Unless
was
you
the first
say-
military.
Teddy Roosevelt, maybe. You
Yeah.
could say he was.
He was, yeah.
That would be the only other one
Uh-huh.
before.
I can't think of another.
No, there wouldn't have been one. So yeah.
Of course, Kennedy, I guess he was in the service, though.
Mhm.
But he wasn't,
It was after Eisenhower.
yeah.
So yeah. So Eisenhower would have been.
But that's not what you call a real military man.
Kennedy wasn't, no.
Yeah.
Uh,
Eisenhower was.
Yeah.
yeah, Eisenhower was a military man.
Yeah.
The rest of them were in the service, but not military people.
Well, Roosevelt, he was
He had his Rough Riders.
just, yeah, he was
He was
just,
probably as much as Kennedy was.
yeah.
We didn't have as much problem adjusting to things here in the South as they did up north. Because the South is very conservative.
And there weren't that many people in the state of Florida, permanent people, at that time either. Even during Vietnam. It was after Vietnam when veterans started coming to Florida. And that's when I think it was probably Desert Storm that brought so many of them. Because of the military hospitals in Florida. James Haley Hospital is rated the top military hospital outside of Walter Reed.
Really.
Yeah, the one that's South Florida.
Do you remember, like, going through, what did you guys think about, like, the Watergate and Richard Nixon stuff? Was that still kind of it didn't really affect you, so you didn't really care about it too much, or did you, or?
Well, it was shocking, but that was all. It did not affect the people here in Florida that much.
We were
Florida was still a democratic state at that point.
most of, if you weren't a Democrat in Florida, you didn't get a chance to vote too often.
No,
Yeah.
it didn't.
At the time, Pinellas County was the biggest Republican county around.
Really?
Yeah. But the rest of the counties were,
The East Coast was all Democratic.
yeah.
All Democratic. And the Democrats ran the state. There's no two ways about it.
Like I said, if you wanted to vote,
You had to be a Democrat.
you had to be a Democrat. Of course, back then they weren't like they are today. They're not that liberal. They weren't that liberal like the Democrats are today. I switched parties. I switched a few years ago to the Republican Party. my dad was a big Democrat.
Miami was a Democratic stronghold. It had people like Senator Smathers and
Yeah.
Claude Pepper and
We
big
just talked about
Democrats.
them Tuesday.
Huh?
We just talked about Pepper and Smathers Tuesday.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I have a thing of there of that Pepper gave us.
Really?
Yeah,
So
we did something for him. What did we do?
I don't remember what we did. Oh, it was up in Wildcat, wasn't
Yeah, I think it was. Well, I let him play golf. I remember playing golf with him.
Yeah, I think so.
Claude Pepper. He was something else.
He sent us this House of Representatives.
Yeah.
See it?
Yeah.
Isn't that
That is. That's awesome. Our teacher talked about how he kind of got a raw deal a little bit, and Smathers used some dirty techniques to kind of slam his name.
Well,
a
I
little
like
bit.
George. But Claude was in office a long time.
Mhm.
Smathers was too.
But I like George.
He ruled a lot of the Senate, that's for sure.
See, we knew him. We knew a lot of the politicians back there, personally. Not that we were big buddies or anything, but he knew who I was. Of course, a lot of them knew who I was because I played ball in Florida. And then a lot of them knew my dad since I was a junior,
Okay.
because Dad got involved in politics. And
My dad helped form the Orange Bowl Committee.
Okay.
He was on the Orange Bowl Committee when it first organized.
Let me kind of shift to like civil rights. What do you remember the whole separate but equal in schools, and how did that kind of play out in the schools? What was the, I guess,
Well, the hardest thing was for the blacks to have to be shipped to a school that they
Like-
had no idea
Plant High School,
what was going on.
from the black community to Plant High School.
okay.
And Robinson, I was at Robinson, and it was cruel the way they did the segregation, because they picked certain students
The desegregation.
to desegregate. We had a girl, we had 5 students, that's all, that were sent to Robinson. They were all outstanding students. And then we got some students from Port Tampa, finally. But this girl was editor of the annual. She was a senior at Blake. Editor of the annual. Outstanding student. Outstanding academically. And they made her transfer to Robinson. She was so unhappy. And there were 2 others the same way that were outstanding students who had to leave and come to Robinson. So our students made them feel very welcome, and we did everything we could to help them adjust and put her back into journalism, put her back into annual and let her be a part of it. It was cruel the way they did it.
Really? So,
And the NAACP is who I blame for it. Don't put that down. But that's who it was that did it. They're the ones who handpicked these kids to go to the schools. It was terrible.
so your school, would you say that they were
Robinson
welcoming?
accepted them.
They did
Accepted
accept
them,
it.
welcomed them, did everything. The students were wonderful to them. And when they had a dance one time, I don't remember if it was the senior prom or what it was, this couple of the black football players didn't show up. So the football players piled into a car and went down to Port Tampa and got them and brought them back to school.
That's something.
Yes. Because they wanted them to realize that they were a part of the school. They were part of it. They belonged there just like the others did.
So do you remember hearing stories of other schools being
Yes.
pretty bad? What were some other ones that were,
Well,
would you say?
there were some who didn't accept it. And there were some kids who, the black students were very unhappy at first. And they had fights, and, you know, they
So
were just the normal.
They formed gangs, so to speak, so they call it protection.
Yeah.
And then some of the blacks tried to intimidate some of the whites, that especially at Plant High School, and get money from them.
But Robinson had no problem. And see, we had black students from the base too
That were already going there, or
that
started going there?
that started there at the same time.
Okay.
Yeah.
So were there, at that time, a lot of probably Robinson's kids were already military kids.
Yes.
So
yes,
they,
were.
being military kids,
They
black,
accepted it.
white, they were
That's
still,
right.
yeah.
That's why Robinson had no trouble. We had no trouble whatsoever with segregation.
Because of the military base.
Well, no,
I
not
mean-
just that. It was our kids. They were wonderful kids. And the administration helped by accepting everything and helping these kids to adjust. And that was what was so important.
Now, what were was Robinson one of the first schools to integrate?
Uh-huh.
It was.
Yeah.
Along with what other schools, do you remember, or
Plant. They integrated Plant right away, too.
really?
Yeah.
Because Plant was probably a symbol back then more than anything,
Yes.
as far as this is
Yes.
a white school.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. That's interesting.
I don't remember what happened to Hillsborough. Of course, being at Robinson, you know, we were just away from it all, being so far out, and really weren't paying attention to what was happening in the other schools. Really.
Really? Wow.
We were just trying to take care of our own.
Mm-hmm.
And the kids were wonderful. The kids were absolutely wonderful. I see Robinson Drew from Madison Junior High and Monroe. And of course that's all and the base. And I can't remember. No, we didn't get anybody from Wilson. We got just strictly there. And Coleman Drew from El Prado was the divider. Now Euclid's the divider. The ones that lived across the street from El Prado went this way, and the others on the other side of the street went that way to Plant.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of people moving.
Mm-hmm.
It was surprising how many would be moving or using their grandparents' address to stay at plant.
Mm-hmm. It probably wasn't as policed back then as it is now.
No, they
Sure.
weren't checked that well. Not for a while.
Were there any were there any sit-ins or any demonstrations, protesting during the civil rights years, I guess, in the early
Not
60s?
in our area, no.
Not around here?
No, I don't remember any, do you?
No, I remember a lot of problems within the school. I remember Tom Mann over Robinson put on the football helmet and had his little bat and would walk around the hall to
I
make
don't
sure.
remember that.
Well, I remember. Tell me about it.
It must have been after I left.
And that must have been, but anyway, Tom Mann was a big tackle that played for us at Tampa U, and he was 6'5", 280 pounds.
He was the football coach, head football coach.
Okay.
He wasn't the head then.
Applin was the head?
Yeah.
I don't remember that at all.
Well, you weren't there the whole time.
No, what was it? I was just there for a year, 2 years, and then went to Madison, as the Dean of Girls, and then went back to Robinson, and as Dean of Girls, until 65.
But there was a lot of problems in the schools where the blacks were shipped from Blake or Middleton.
Out.
I think they even stopped football at Blake and Middleton, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not sure about that. But they sure hurt their football teams because they were a powerful team.
Yeah.
They had some good football players.
Well, Blake went down the drain until they built that new one.
Yeah.
Then Middleton, didn't they turn into a middle school?
Middleton was closed
Yeah.
for a while.
I know I've seen pictures of Blake Middleton games from back in the 40s. Huge crowds.
Oh, yeah.
Huge crowds.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when Blake and Middleton played,
That was the big rivalry.
Was it? Was it Plant and Hillsboro?
Mm-hmm. They were the big
And
rivals.
Blake and Middleton.
Yeah.
that was a big deal back in the 40s.
Yeah.
And the 50s was Thanksgiving Day.
Really? They played on
Plant
Thanksgiving.
Hillsborough played. And back then,
The girls dressed up, wore heels, stockings,
heels had the big mums,
hat to the football game.
and the fellas wore their sport coats or suits and attend the game, and it was a big thing.
Big deal. Yep. Same way in Miami. Most all the high schools in Florida, it was that way.
Mm-hmm.
Miami and Miami Edison were the big rivals.
Yeah.
And that was the Thanksgiving Day game. Thanksgiving afternoon.
Miami Edison now.
Huh?
The college coaches that go in and scout there and recruit there, they need a police escort.
Yeah.
In the coach's office. Police officer follows them everywhere.
Is that right? In Miami?
Mm-hmm.
Whew.
We signed 5 kids out of Miami Edison one year. 4 of them are still at USF. I'm going to go ahead and stop this. I think I got enough information
Yeah.
as far as